Welcome, everyone. This election season, the North Pacific's Ministry of Radio is sponsoring a series of voice chat and text-based town halls for each candidate. We hope this election is informative, and we encourage you to participate by asking questions in the chat. And now, let's get started. Welcome, E. Styles.
Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, can you give us a brief history of your time in the North Pacific? Although brief, it is very important.
Sure. So I'm a very new face around here. Obviously, I created my account on the 24th of January, and a week later got citizenship after figuring out issues with the admin check, of course. And in my first month, I got involved with the North Pacific Army. Did a couple jumps with them. We've been enjoying it, had a great time. And then around the beginning of March, or toward the end of February, beginning of March, I reached out to Robespierres to ask for a spot on the speaker staff, and he took a chance on me. And since then, for the last 2 months since then, I've been active on the speaker staff, performing checks and doing all the fun stuff that comes with being a deputy speaker. I also, for the last month, I believe, maybe like mid-March, was appointed Deputy Minister of Defense under Namaria, and have been processing applications for the NPA and helping lead operations since then.
Did you decide to run for speaker?
I decided to run for speaker because we need strong candidates to fill the role, and I believe that I'm one. I have experience, while, like I said, brief. I have some experience in the speaker's office, and I know what is expected of me. So I believe that I am the best candidate and one of the best people in the region to lead the speaker's office, and so that's why I ran.
Can you give us a brief summary of the core points of your campaign?
The core points of my campaign are pretty simple. I don't have any major big goals to set my name on, like, oh, I'm going to do this for the speaker's office, because I don't believe that the speaker's office needs that right now. The speaker's office, at least from everything I can see in my time in there, runs pretty efficiently. Issues here and there, not everything is always 100% perfect, but it generally runs very well. And I don't want to shake up a formula that works well. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. So the main point of my campaign is to take what's good, keep doing it, and try and make it better. To that end, I'm going to continue some of the things that have gone on under Robespierres. The biggest one would be, for me, is stuff like audits. There were 2 audits performed during Robespierres' term. I'd like to make those more regular, probably a monthly thing. That's what I'm thinking at the moment, so that we can make sure that there's no discrepancies in any of our documentation, because that can cause issues for people in terms of just knowing who is a citizen, who's not, and that's generally our job to keep on top of that. So that would be the main focus, and then my secondary focus would definitely be developing more talent for the speaker's office, so that we have plenty of good, strong candidates in the future to lead the speaker's office. Once my term ends and future terms end, we have this good foundation to build on.
What is one rule you would add to the rules of the Regional Assembly or the standing procedures, and why?
If I had to add one rule, that's a great question, actually. I haven't really thought about this one, to be honest. If I would add one rule to the standing procedures of the Regional Assembly, I think I would put more time in terms of put a requirement on in terms of non-legislative proposals, in terms of a time between the end of debate and the scheduling of a vote. The standing procedures aren't binding, of course. Any future speaker could change them at their discretion, and I think that's for the best. But I think that there should be a defined period of discussion on non-legislative proposals before voting can take place, similar to the formal debate period on legislative proposals, but I wouldn't necessarily make it as long, and I would make it easily waivable if people don't need to have that discussion period. But I also don't like necessarily the idea that we could have a non-legislative proposal on, say, an appointment by the delegate or whatever, what have you, and have that go immediately to vote just with a motion for a vote in a second. I'd rather there still be some period of time for people to debate before voting is happening, and I'd rather not leave that at the discretion of the speaker in that situation.
Do you see anything of Robespierre's term as speaker as a problem?
I don't think that anything that went wrong during Robespierre's term was ever like his fault. The worst situations like that we had would have to be the LOL 2639's absence. That was a frustrating situation because you never want any member of your deputy speaker's staff to just fall silent, and that because that leaves work to be done and a hole in our coverage of the various days on the speaker's schedule. So that was definitely a low point, but in particular, I don't think it was handled poorly, and I think everything went well beyond that. I think that most of the issues were beyond anyone in the office's control.
Who do you have in mind for deputy speaker?
I have a couple of ideas for deputy speakers. I would like to maintain as many of the members of the current staff as possible. So if Dredton, Peeps, and Caston are willing to stay on, I'd love to have them. They've worked very well, and I'd like to continue that, of course. In terms of other people, I have spoken to Dill, who was a former speaker in TRR, I believe, and I'd like him to come on if he's willing. And beyond that, I'd also be interested in offering ARC or Starborg roles in my deputy speaker staff because they've expressed interest, obviously, by running. But beyond that, I'm willing for anyone who wants to get involved and commit to, putting in the time and doing the work. I'd be more than willing to have them in my speaker's office.
What is the biggest issue facing the office of the speaker? How do you intend to address this issue?
I think one of the bigger issues that I try to address in my campaign is that I feel like there's always, and this is always going to be true, I think, is that there will always be a bit of a dearth in terms of experienced people who are able to step up into the spot, into the role of speaker. Right now, we're in a decent place with that in terms of I think that any one of the people on our current speaker staff could do that, but obviously not all of them are going to be available. And so that's going to be an issue. Plenty of people have eyes elsewhere in the judiciary, the executive, in other regions, what have you. So I think that's always something that we could really focus on. And of course, that's going to be my goal with my deputy speaker staff is getting good, committed people who would be willing to step up in the future.
Robespierre asks, what would you say has been your biggest takeaway from the past 2 months as a result of serving in the speaker's office under me?
I think my biggest takeaway has been that it's really important to stay on top of things because it's easy to forget to say do checks for a day, easy to make mistakes. So always, being diligent, letting people know when you're not going to be available to do checks for the day, making sure you're on top of those things is really important because slight delays in the citizenship application process can be costly for the region in terms of losing good, committed people who just aren't willing to stick around that long through the citizenship application process, particularly when they're being bombarded with recruitment telegrams from other regions promising all the, this best region, we're going to be so fun. Meanwhile, the region I'm currently in can't even process my citizenship application. So I think that's definitely been my big takeaway is to be on top of stuff and make sure that the speaker's office is running well and that I'm personally doing my part.
Robespierre also asks, what's been your biggest lesson and how will that translate to your service as our speaker if you're elected?
My biggest lesson. I'd say I think I've learned how to help how I'm supposed to lead in this region, what the region expects of the speaker's office, and as an individual contributor to our government. How to be this figure who can be trusted, who is able to answer questions. I've had a couple of citizenship applicants direct message me asking for help or questions on the citizenship process and how far along it is. And I feel like I've been able to answer their questions pretty thoroughly. And I think that that's going to translate into my service as our speaker. In that being, the big part of it is being a leader and exhibiting this ability to run things and be knowledgeable and know how to run these little things and kind of explain things to people and whatnot. So that's going to be really important for me.
Robespierres also asks, what is your take on pre-titles and citizenship applications? Do you support rejecting pre-titles on the basis of them being embellishments, or would you use your discretion to accept those who include their pre-titles?
My take on pre-titles and citizenship applications is pretty simple. I don't personally like the idea that we are going to be, as I said before, like speed in applications is important. I don't want people to lose good people because of inefficiency or because of some other hang-up that's avoidable. And I think pre-titles would fall into that hang-up. I don't think that they are such a big stumbling block as sometimes it's made out to be, because it's a relatively easy fix on our part to look up just the name without the pre-title if we discover that, in fact, someone did include a pre-title. And it's one less thing for someone who's new to a region to have to worry about. And I don't think that the law is necessarily clear on it. It's not clear that it is an embellishment. So given that it's not clear, and in situations where the law is not clear, the speaker has the discretion, I would allow, or I'd instruct my deputy speakers, and I personally myself would allow citizenship applications with pre-titles to be passed.
Ivanko asks, do you know the tale of Dark Plagueis the Wise?
Well, it's not a story the Jedi would tell you, so that's all I have to say on that.
Robespierre asks, in your opinion, what has been the strongest point of the Speaker's office this past term? What's been the lowest?
I think the strongest point of the Speaker's office this past term has been, excuse me, has been our responsiveness generally. I think that we're generally on top of citizenship applications and citizenship checks in general. That's been the high point. We're generally good about it. We are, we communicate well in the speaker's office chat. We are always able to communicate when we're unable to do our checks and be covered for them. And I think that that's probably our strongest point. For our lowest point, that's a lot tougher because, as I've said before, I don't think there's been much that hasn't ran well. If I had to pick one, this is going to be a very technical point, but I do feel like there are times when updating the citizenship sheet, when we add someone to the citizenship roles and get them masked and whatnot. One thing I think from time to time I find myself even lacking on, and I've definitely noticed others, is the citizenship stat sheet. At times it kind of falls by the wayside in a lot of people's minds. And we haven't been updating those when people CTE or leave the region for whatever reason. Their citizenship, sorry, I misclicked. But that's been one of our lowest points. We don't always stay on top of the citizenship stat sheet as much as we should, and I'd like to correct that.
What are your thoughts on speakers participating in the debate and casting votes that could potentially pass or fail a piece of legislation?
I don't believe that the speaker should generally be voting on motions before the assembly. That's generally, I think it's important to remain neutral, and even the appearance of neutrality is really important. Even looking like you may not be, impartial is not a good look, and it's something that should be avoided. In terms of debate, I think there's more of a place for debate, maybe, because there are times when it's important to, at the very least, mention, if there's something you find glaringly wrong with a bill, then I feel like it's important to mention that and to bring that up if no one else has. It should be done sparingly, if you ask me. I don't think that the speaker should be having too outsized the role in debate, but other than that, I don't see much issue there.
Robespierres asks, do you have any concerns about taking on the job of speaker? If so, what are they?
Not particularly. It's definitely going to be something slightly outside my comfort zone. It's a big role, but I do feel like I'm ready to take it on. I know what's expected of me, and I'm more than up to the challenge.
LFG Grande asks, are there any past programs the Speaker's office has run that you would consider resurrecting?
I haven't thought much about past programs, mostly because I haven't had a lot of experience with them, and the ones I've heard about have not been talked of highly. I've heard discussion on the speaker's staff, similar to the executive staff, and a lot of people seem to feel that didn't run very well or had little to do. So I don't have any plans at this time. I could definitely be convinced if someone has a good idea about that, but at this time, I don't have any plans.
Robespierre asks, what were your thoughts on the April 2021 performance review poll that was run this past month?
I thought it was a really good idea to have a performance review poll, personally. I thought that that was a very smart idea from Robespierre, because I think the Speaker's office should always be very receptive to feedback and be willing to open itself up to criticism and correct itself if there is a considerable amount of criticism. Beyond that, in terms of content of the performance review, I think it generally confirmed what I thought, that it seems most people are pretty, it's generally the Speaker's office is running well. Most people think we're doing well. So I thought it was a good plan, something that I would plan to continue and maybe do more frequently, even if I were elected. But yeah, it was a good idea, and I would continue it.
Vivanco asks, the VSP poll gives you a certain lead for the speaker, but there are certainly a lot of people who still don't know how to vote. What would you say to those people?
To the people who are still undecided in the speaker's race, I would tell them that I believe I am the most qualified for the position. I know exactly what's expected of me. I am the only one who has experience in the office. And I think that my ideas for the office are exactly what it needs to keep things running how they were and to not try and, mess up a good thing. I do understand that some people might criticize my lack of experience, but I don't believe that that will be a stumbling block because I know what I need to do. And I have enough confidence and the willpower to pull out a good, solid term.
Will you yourself propose changes to the laws? If yes, how will you ensure that you will remain impartial?
I don't plan on making any changes to the law at this point. I certainly don't have any major thoughts about something I need to change, and I also don't think that anything I could potentially propose will be unique. I think that if there's an issue that's glaring enough that others would propose it, so I don't foresee ever proposing any changes to the laws. If I were to, and say something did come up that I didn't notice before or hadn't thought about in a certain way, I would personally, I think the best way to handle that if I were to propose a law would be to have someone on the deputy staff try and handle more of the responsibility with that. I have quite a bit of trust in any of the people that I plan on putting on my speaker staff, and I would entrust them with enough aspects of vote counting and moving things along that I believe it would run just as smoothly without the potential negative appearances that running my own vote would, give off.
How many deputies will you appoint? What are specific traits that you are looking for? How much of the workload will you share with them?
In terms of how many deputies I would appoint, I don't have a definite number. I am more than open to some variation. My sweet spot would be 5 to 7, because I think that's enough to make sure work is being done, getting sort of an even spread of work between people and not too much work for any one person. But I would still, it wouldn't be too over encumbering. Whereas, having 20 speakers or something, deputy speakers, would be too much in my opinion. I think that my hard limit would probably be around 10. I think I said that on my campaign thread. So that's probably where I would draw the line of it being too unwieldy. But up until that point, I'm willing to have, anyone. But in terms of what I would expect from a deputy speaker, the biggest thing for me, and I think I've said this, is willingness to do the job. So if someone comes to me and says, I'd like to be a deputy speaker, I don't have experience, but I'm willing to learn, just teach me and I will commit to it, I'll, give my all, then I'm more than willing to offer them a spot on my speaker's staff. Prior experience in speaker's work would definitely be a plus, but it's certainly not anything that I'm going to disqualify someone off of. If they're willing to work, then I will teach them and get them working. Now, what was the last part of your question?
How much of the workload will you share with them?
I don't think that I should be doing any less work than any of my deputies. I will, at the very least, be doing equal to the most work that any of my deputies are doing. And beyond that, I would expect myself to be the lead on most of that stuff. So counting votes, and any other kind of work like that isn't necessarily happening all the time, I would be the first one to be doing that. And that would be my expectation for myself, is being the lead on anything that's going on.
Vivanco asks, how important would you say the Speaker's office is to the region?
The Speaker's office is indispensable to the region. We keep track of the citizens. We run the citizenship applications. Basically, without the Speaker's say, people do not get added to the Speaker rolls. People don't get the citizenship role on the forum. And so that's incredibly important. On top of that, we run debate. The Speaker is the one who schedules votes, who ends debate on a topic, who keeps order in the regional assembly, and who runs and counts the votes. And that's vital to the function of a region. Without the Speaker's office functioning, people can't get appointed and confirmed to their positions. Laws that need to be changed or passed can't get passed. Without the Speaker's office, the region, or at least very big major functions of the region, just simply cannot function.
Robespierres asks, time for a hypothetical. In the event that you're able to retain everyone from this term's crop of deputy speakers, in addition to appointing Dill, who would you trust with the speaker protocols on succession within the office, i.e. you get hit by a bus? Who takes over?
That's a really good question, and I would basically have trust in most of my deputy speakers that I'm planning on appointing right now. I would trust them with the speaker's protocols. If I had to pick right now, I think that Dredton is probably the most well-known and trusted within the region, and has proven that they would be able to step up in a crisis. They're a member of the Security Council and a global moderator. So that would be the person I would choose to take over in the event of some sort of crisis like that. But I certainly would trust any of the current crop of deputies to be able to step up if a situation were to befall us. And I would definitely train any deputy that I get, any other potential deputies that I haven't necessarily named yet who don't have experience. I would certainly train them to a degree where if the entire speaker staff dropped dead tomorrow, they would be able to run some semblance of a functioning ship until replacements could be made.
If a vote is cancelled due to the objections of the citizenry, then another vote is also voted motion for. How do you act?
Could you repeat the question again?
Sure. If a vote is cancelled due to the objections of the citizenry, and then another vote is motioned for it, how do you act?
So I believe in this case there are rules on point in this situation. So this would be the 3 objections, which would lead to a vote being canceled. In that case, in order for that to be overridden, I believe the number is 10, or I think it's a number for the number for quorum, which I don't have on point right now. I don't know the exact number required for quorum at this time, but that would be the next process. Would be to probably solicit ask to say we need X number quorum. We need enough for quorum to continue with this vote, given the objections. And beyond that, I think that there's nothing that I can do in that situation if there have been objections to the scheduling of a vote, outside of waiting for the proper number of people to motion for a vote to actually happen, to override the objection.
Vivanco asks, out of the candidates, what makes you stand out? Compare yourself with your current electoral rival, Skaraborg.
Skaraborg is certainly not a bad candidate for speaker, in my opinion. He has experience in the region, currently game side advocate, and he's certainly been in the region longer than I am. But what makes me stand out over him, I believe, is my experience with the speaker's office. I have spent the last 2 months working in the speaker's office. I believe I've done well and demonstrated my dedication to the job. And I would not have much of a learning period if I were to become speaker, whereas I believe that Starboard probably would. I would have, obviously, there's a bit of a difference between a deputy speaker and the actual speaker, but I don't think that there would be near as big of a transition for me. And I think that I would be able to immediately hit the ground running and run an efficient speaker's office.
Robespierres asks, what's one thing that you believe that your opponent, Skaraborg, has done well with this campaigning period?
The biggest thing for me with Skaraborg is I really admire that they're willing to throw their hat in the ring. They haven't worked with the speaker's office before, and yet I do believe that they have made some strong points in their campaign thread, and that the fact that they're willing to take on a role like this is really really impressive to me, and I really like that from them. I think that being a little bold, being willing to put yourself out there is incredibly important in any situation, really, and putting yourself on the line and saying I'm willing to do this. What do you think of me? Give me a shot. Is really really important. So I definitely would admire that from Skaraborg.
And Vivanco asks, dogs or cats? Be careful with what you answer.
Ooh, I'm gonna make everyone mad with this one. I have both dogs and cats. So every dog people hate me and cat people hate me. I have 3 dogs back home. All great, top-notch dogs. And I have 4 cats at the moment. Yep, and here come the negative comments. Terrific. It's always the middle answer is always the worst one to make.
Yes. But honestly,
There's no need to make a choice. You don't have to. There's enough love to go around. They're all top-notch animals.
ooh, pink. All right, everyone, thanks for coming. I hope this town hall answered some of your questions about E-Style's campaign and will help prepare you for the election to come. And with that, goodbye!